So following on, that's the gearbox actually together now. I did double check these and I was wrong. The torque needs to go much higher for the larger bolts. I've also put the again windage plate, whichever you want to call it, which is the plate that goes in there. It's from Guessworks. Mine looks a little bastardised for two reasons. One, I'm running an MED strap on the centre, so the studs are longer, so they've had to sit in there. Also on the other side, you'll probably see there's a few markings here. It was actually catching the crank, so what I've done is I've ground all the way around here and I've actually pushed it down with a rubber mallet to actually give it a little bit more space. So it actually doesn't, because there's nothing under this side of the gearbox anyway. I was happy for it to sit further, and all down here as well, it's all sitting nicely. And when I turn the gearbox, it's not catching. So that is the gearbox complete. So we'll get it attached to the engine today. Alright, another Steveism, whether you agree with me or not, that's up to debate, is these gaskets don't always sit well around where the O-ring's got to go. As you can see on this side, you've got full distance, but as we come around there's overlap, especially with the oil seal. You really want a good seal in that area. So what I do is I'm going to just go and put some of the bolts through to hold place the gasket. So this hopefully then lines the gasket up. So there's very little movement. There is movement, but it gives you a good idea of where it's got to be placed. What I do is I take a new Stanley knife blade and just take the edge off. There you go. So what I'll take, a bag of stuff with my half moon, got the gearbox seal itself, so as that goes in now, I'm happier that sits over rather than just pushing gasket in there. You can go a little bit further out as well, but I'm happy with that. Okay, so I've got the block on top of the gearbox. This is only a temporary measure at the moment. There's no gasket, there's no O-ring seal. This is just to place on the top at the moment. Whereas I was mentioning about the windage tray, whatever you want to call it. I want to just make sure that the crank isn't catching it. When I built it for version 2 and I put it on, I found out that the crank actually just touched it on piston 1. So I had to remove the speedo housing off and try and adjust it with a screwdriver. Very rudimentary, very silly thing for me to have done. But again, you live and learn, and hopefully I'll give this a turn. It feels okay. No sound coming from the tray. And the crank turns smoothly. Good. Right, put the block back on now. So, 2 new paper gaskets. The hole's been made large enough to take the new O-ring seal, and I'm using the later Rover solid half moon seal. These were put in or introduced due to the amount of MPIs that were leaking oil from the half moon seal. These are put in retrospectively. Usually you get the softer ones, some people trim them down. So what I'm going to do is I'll put the block on first. I'm going to put gasket sealer on, and I'm going to put this in. Because I've not intended to run the engine for some time, it'll give the sealant a good enough time to seal nice and properly before I start putting pressure and oil through it. Cool, so let's get on with it. First things first, as per usual, bit of Loctite silicone seal on it, and then we'll put the block on. Okay, so that's gone in. Just going to drive it home a little with a rubber mallet and a drift, just to make sure it goes all the way in. Take into account that I'm about to put on the timing chain cover as well, so that will help push it, but I just want to be 100% sure that everything's in where it should be. And I'm going to put a bit of sealant up in these corners here, just for reassurance. Okay, for the timing chain cover, I've got a new gasket. It'll orient its way around like that, so same old, bit of sealant, and we'll get that sorted. Okay, so next is to put onto the timing chain cover. I've got a few nuts and bolts with me here, 2 for the lower and then for the triangle, which we'll sort out in a bit. Hopefully the cam will just support it enough as we install it. So anytime you do something like this, always get yourself a new triangle. I'm going to make 100% sure I've got it the right way, so stand by. So the triangle itself has a machined face on one side and it's got the TAM number on the other. It also only goes in one place, so if you try spinning it around, you'll probably notice like the one there, the bottom one's out. Yeah, if you spin it, all of them line up. All been torqued up with thread lock, and eventually when we start sorting out the pulleys, we're looking for a camshaft end float between 3 and 7 thou of an inch. So that's 0.076 to 1.8 millimeters roughly. Having a look down there at the moment, doesn't look like there's a nice gap in there. So once we've sorted out the pulley, we'll check for end float using the DTI. I've just finished off timing the camshaft up now. Kent say that it needs to be 106, and after 80 agonising minutes I've managed to get it absolutely bang on, which I'm quite pleased with myself about. So the next thing that I'm going to do is sort out the float. This isn't shimmed. A bit can be changed using a different gasket on the back, but I know from previous experience that I've been pretty lucky with these. So I've set the DTI to 0, and we are after between, if I refer to the Haynes manual, 3 to 7 thousandths of an inch. So what I'll do is that's pushed all the way home. Just get a little bit of an Allen key behind, give it a push, and I'm reading that as just over 4 thou, so I'm happy with that. Okay, so now that we've sorted the end float out and the cam timing, just going to go over just the O-ring, make sure there's no brakes or anything in there. It's only 2,500 miles old, so I'm not too concerned about it. Got to put the oil slinger on. There's an F-on it there, so that goes to the front, which is this part of the engine. Find the woodruff. There we go, on. And there's a gap between that and the chain. So next part is to get the cover itself. This has had a new seal, new O-ring seal on it, at the front just there. I've just lightly oiled it just to make sure, just get rid of some of the excess, and that just places on over the top. Okay, so the last bit, just make sure the pulley goes on with the washer as well. It's going to get a little bit loud. I'll put this on. The impact driver initially, and then once we've got the crank on, I'll do it properly. Cool. Okay, so moving on to the transfer box side. So this is the gasket that I used so I could get the right amount of fan float for the idler. So same as usual. Bit of silicone sealant, get it all on, and yeah, cue the time lapse. Okay, so that took a little longer whilst I got all the bearings lined up. I've removed the primary gear, but you can put this on and off as you wish while you're doing this. I just found it was easier whilst it was off. So, as stated before, I've got two types, UNF and UNC. These have been cleaned up. They're going to be done up to 18 foot-pound torque. So, again, cue the time lapse. And we'll get these sorted. So that's pretty much all I can do for the time being while I wait for the cylinder head, as well as a C-clip for the primary gear. So I've got the oil feed on for the turbo. I've retorqued all the bolts where I can. I've put the oil pressure and oil temperature sensors on to the front. They're the AEM ones. The T-piece on the front as well, that's the one that provides the turbo with the oil feed. All the bolts for the gearbox to the block have all been checked. Water pump pulleys on, that's all been torqued to spec, as well as the timing cover, that's all been redone. As you notice as well, I've also put the lower mounts on, the lower steadies, so that's on. And that one's on, that's why it's on wood, because otherwise it'd be scraping on the ground and not wearing perfectly good powder coating. And so yeah, just waiting for the bits and pieces, and when we're done, the engine hopefully should go back in. So rather than doing some buttery shots and just getting to the point with this, cylinder head's back. So Alex at the Car Kitchen, I'll put a link in the description below, as well as Phil Door, Turbo Phil, both do really, really good turbo cylinder heads. The pair of them have got a wealth of knowledge on how to do this. So Alex did it this time round. Unfortunately Phil was a bit busy, so managed to get some time in during the lockdown for him to get some work done. What I've had done is each of the chambers has been taken from 24cc to 25cc. They've all been profiled and polished off very, very nicely. I mean, he's done an absolutely stunning bit of work here, and that lowers my compression ratio from just slightly over 9 to 1 to 8.7 to 1, which means I can raise the boost a little bit more and it's less prone to detonation. In terms of the chamber size themselves, the inlets themselves, they've not been changed at all. If you usually get a high performance race head naturally aspirated, you usually find that the inlets are much bigger. You don't need that on a turbo. You usually find that they've got enough help behind them. Alex also slightly skimmed the top as well because there was a lot of corrosion, so he's got rid of that. On my cylinder head, I've got dual springs, standard top hats. The guides are the bronze type, and I've got the MPI style stem seals on all 8 cylinders. He's had to redo the guides because on number 2, which I'm getting right, was that one, was a little bit loose, so it was letting a little bit of oil in. It also said that cylinder 2 itself was letting a little bit of oil in as well. So they've all been done. It's had a full lease of life. So I suppose rather than just sitting there looking at it, we'll get it fitted. Okay, so I'm fitting a standard BK450 head gasket. You can get these from Mini Spares, Mini Sport, P&L Minis, actually pretty much anywhere you can buy mini parts, you'll be able to pick up a Payan BK450. These are fantastic for turbo applications. Very highly recommended on some of the higher boosted guys. They're using these rather than cheap or copper gaskets. Very, very simple to set up. You're looking for the word top on there, and once you've got that top, it only goes one way round anyway. Your push rods go through the bigger holes, and then you've got your coolant lines at the front. So yeah, we'll get that fitted on and torqued down. So the cylinder had all torqued down, 45 foot-pound torque for the main 9, a 10 and 11 are to 25 foot-pound, as well as the rocker post 4. So the next obvious piece of progress, time to install the turbo. Okay, so that's now fitted. I did a bit off camera because I had to elongate some of the holes to make sure the manifold fit properly. So to give you an understanding of how the GT1752 fits on the back of the turbo, this is a Fusion Fabrications exhaust manifold bolted straight to a genuine Garrett GT1752. You get these off Saab, I think Saab 9.3s or Saab 9.5s. Anyway, it's the one with the GT17 on it. The oil feed, which you probably saw me putting on, this goes in and round the back. This is a pain in the backside to actually reach. It's a 14mm spanner, but just because of the way in which it's the turbo's clocked, you can't actually get to it very easily. The two unions, the one at the back here, there's one around the front of the turbo as well. These are the water feed for it, so this keeps the jacket inside the turbo cool using the engine's coolant. So from the thermostat housing, there'll be a pipe that goes through the inlet manifold, and then this one will pick up on the other side. It'll feed it, and the drain, which is that one, will go to the pipe just before the inlet of the water pump. So it's getting a positive feed from the top of the cylinder head, and it's getting a draw from the water pump. So it keeps the water going through it quite nicely. The water drain A lot of people keep saying, "Oh, Steve, why didn't you go to the cam sensor?" Well, to put it into some sort of perspective, the cam sensor, if I put my finger on it, is and draw out. It's exactly level with the outlet of the turbo. So you need this to be gravity fed and ideally straight down. Now mine goes straight into the gearbox casting. It's a bit of a crappy weld, but it works. The problem is when you're trying to TIG onto a giant piece of aluminium, it acts like a heat sink and it takes the heat away very, very quickly. So the guy that did it for me, with what he'd got, did actually quite a good job because it's solid on there, and that goes just underneath the windage tray in the gearbox. And now it actually sprays directly on top of the main shaft support bearing housing from CAD. So it's giving it a positive feed all the time throughout it. So the next part of this for me will be putting the inlet manifold on. Okay, so the majority of it's back together. Some inlet and exhaust are both on. Turbo's all set up within. Mock trial of the coolant line at the back there, so if you get an idea of where it's going to run. There'll be some heat-proof sleeving over the top of this. The primary gear is all back on now, set to 4.5 thou float, so that's all been in and torqued up. Everything else across the top's been done, rechecked. 45 foot-pound torque for the main 9, 25 foot-pound for everything else. That out of the way. As promised, all done up. I've just got to flip the tab across the other side, and I think we're pretty much ready to go back in. Well, that's her in. Didn't really put up much of a fight. A few changes I've had to make recently with the turbo feed. So as I described before, the outlet from the thermostat housing now goes to the heater matrix, goes to the manifold, and then goes down towards the turbo, and it comes back out through here. So this will actually go to the pipe work when I've sorted it down here. This is my next Everest. I need to try and work out how to get the turbo feed without crushing it, as well as the coolant pipes. I think it is as simple as changing one of the rubber pipes to actually a aluminium 90 degree. So I'll get one of those ordered and hopefully go from there. So that's it for this episode, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.